Hello and welcome back to the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. Eddie Radosevich, Josh McCuistion, George Stoya back here in studio. And believe it or not, it is Monday, November 6th. The sun did rise following a Bedlam weekend that did obviously not go Oklahoma's way. Let's jump into it, though. Josh, you were out and about. I mean, you went down to IMG this weekend. You saw maybe one of the best performances that I think you've ever sent back, just in terms of what Andrew Marsh was able to do. Let's start there. The 2025 Oklahoma wide receiver target, Andrew Marsh, on Thursday night. 9 receptions, 238 yards, 5 touchdowns. Also caught a 2-point conversion. And most simply, I think that you said it in your interview with Andrew Marsh after the game. That was one of the more incredible, most impressive performances that we've seen from somebody that you've gone out and covered.
Yeah, there's just not a lot that he could have showed you on the field that he didn't. Like, I mean, you name it, like short stuff, long, outrunning guys. Again, and you can watch him blocking. I mean, he's nasty. Like almost approaches dirty as a receiver. Like, I say that as a compliment. Like, he blocks like an offensive lineman. Like, he really gets after you. But I mean, you see him here. He's outrunning defenders. He's shaking guys in space. And he's got a couple where he just shows a lot of physicality that you just don't expect from a junior receiver in high school. That, like I said, in the interview you're talking about, Eddie, incredibly soft-spoken, quiet kid. But, boy, he's got some nasty to him. And I couldn't have been more impressed with Andrew Marsh.
Josh, OU's already got, I think, several guys committed in this 2025 class at wide receiver, but where does he stand? I'm assuming he's a priority for OU, and also, who are some of the other teams that are probably going after him?
Yeah, Marsh is absolutely a priority. This is one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers in the country, in my opinion. Guys like DeCorian Moore at Duncanville, to name a couple of others, or one other, I guess, in that case. But there's no question. I think he is a guy that probably one of the few that Oklahoma is just like, even as loaded as the wide receiver room and class may be, they'll save a spot for him. He's a special talent. Now, I will say, just talking to him, I think right now his focus is he's wanting to get out and see like the Michigans, the Ohio States. He wants to see some places a little farther from home. I think he feels like he's got a pretty good read on Oklahoma, Texas A&M, some of the local powers, LSU as well. But I really think Oklahoma is in a good spot here. I mean, it's not that I would say they lead or anything along those lines, but again, it's another guy that really likes Emmett Jones. There's a lot of connection there. And I think that just given enough time, Oklahoma is going to kind of win him over with, okay, you can come in as your freshman year, you'd play with Jackson Arnold, the quarterback's already kind of there for you. The wide receiver room is going to go through a lot of turnover in the next couple of years. I think we can all kind of see that coming. So I think there's a lot to sell him on as well.
This might be one of my favorite plays right there, where he whoops the guy and then runs through like 3 tackles. He was incredible. Again, 9 receptions, 238 yards, 5 touchdowns, plus the 2-point conversion. And if you want to see Josh's post-game interview with Andrew Marsh, the Katy Jordan 4-star wide receiver, it is already posted on Scoop Editorial YouTube page. Just incredible. I mean, nationally, you think he's one of the better wide receivers in that 2025 class?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I think right now we've got him at on 3.
Number 5 overall.
The number 5 receiver in the country, number 24 overall player. And you look at the industry ranking on 3, 19 overall nationally in the number 5 wide receiver. Nobody, 24/7 has him, just inside the 100, but almost universally, he is a top 50 player in the country. So he's a big time guy. And, on that play that you were talking about, Eddie, that's what he showed everything. You want speed? Okay, he's got that. You want some physicality? He's got that. He made a couple of catches where you're just like, holy cow. And he's got huge hands. The thing that stood out to me is I'm watching him on the sidelines, and I was trying to get a picture or two, and his helmet's sitting off to the side, and he just kind of reaches over like you or I would pick up a baseball, and he just grabs his helmet, palms it, and puts it on his head. and you're just like, what in the hell? Like, I mean, that's space alien stuff. Like, his hands are very large. He catches everything really naturally. And again, just a special talent.
Unbelievable. That was on Thursday night from a Thursday night game in Texas. You made it over to Orlando, Florida. Got to see Tropicana Field for the first time. I'm sure that was rather exciting.
That is a horror show of a baseball stadium. That's the most pitiful excuse I've ever seen for a professional. That shouldn't pass for a good high school stadium. It's terrible.
Sure. You were on your way to go see IMG Academy, though, and a litany of Oklahoma targets as well as the commitments. Let's start with the two commitments on the team, and that is Jayden Jackson and David Stone. Senior night, it looked like, for IMG.
It was, and a very kind of that was my first time at IMG, because I mean, obviously Oklahoma's recruited the school for a long time, but never really had the presence that they have now. And obviously helped by a guy like David Stone and obviously Jayden Jackson as well. Very interesting atmosphere. There's a lot of it that does feel very boarding school. Like it was very kind of unique, and we could get into all that, but I know people just want to hear about the games of these guys, but it was it really is hard to put it into words when you watch a school like IMG or Mater Dei or Bosco, and you're just like, there's just dudes everywhere. Like, all of these guys are going to play college football. And I mean, David Stone's backup on the defensive line is a 6'6", 315-pound defensive lineman who's committed to Mississippi State. That's a backup at IMG, and you're just like, good Lord, it's just nuts. But yeah, they, and we can get into each guy individually, but just couldn't have been more impressed with just the overall talent and athleticism at IMG.
Josh, we see Jayden Jackson right there. I feel like, everybody talks about David Stone, and rightfully so. I mean, he is the gem of this class, right? But talk about Jayden Jackson, man. Is he a guy that could come in and maybe even contribute in his freshman year?
George, I think there's a conversation where you feel more confident about him having a role as a freshman than you do David. I don't think that's the way that'll play, but I could hear it. Like, I don't think it's crazy, because Jayden his game translates so well. He plays so low. He's so strong. And I keep saying he is more athletic than he gets credit for. He kind of gets, typecast as this, nose tackle that's just a plugger and is going to eat up blocks and that kind of stuff. But you can see it here. He has some ability to get upfield. He's very quick-footed. And like I said, when you play that low, it's really hard for an offensive lineman, to move you off the spot. But if you're trying to get upfield, what do I do with you? It's like trying to slow down a bowling ball that's 300 pounds. Like, you just really have to fight through that and kind of deal with it. And I think he is. I'm going to send in a rankings recommendation. I think he needs a little bit of a move up. Nothing crazy. I'm not telling you his ceiling is sky high, but I will be very surprised if Jayden Jackson is not a very functional and solid college football player.
And just in case anybody is wondering, David Stone did change numbers throughout the game. Yes. So he's number 14 in a lot of clips, and he's obviously number 90 in a lot of clips. What did you think about David Stone, seeing him in action for the first time in probably 3 years?
Yeah, it was my first time since seeing him, and I think I mentioned this last week when he was playing at Del City against your Putnam City North Panthers, Eddie.
Playoff team.
And I can't get over how much he's developed. Like, I mean, and I've been a guy, and I don't love the whole IMG thing. I fully own that. Although the people down there were incredibly nice, incredibly helpful. Want to give them their due. They were great to work with. But he has gotten so much better with his hands and his pad level. Like, and part of it is he's had to, because he's playing elite guys like himself every day in practice. I mean, Jayden Jackson talked about that. I know we don't have the interview up yet, but he talked about the practices at IMG are much harder than the games. And you watch what they're running out there, and IMG has a sophomore offensive lineman with an offer from OU that can't even start for them. So I mean, like, that's kind of the idea of how unreal that place is. But with Stone, I think the thing that maybe stood out to me the most, he slides out to defensive end, and it doesn't look wildly out of place. Like, he can create pressure off the corner. He could do that. You wonder if OU next year, I was talking about this on one of the Monday Morning Idiot videos, And it was, you kind of look at how OU's personnel could shake out next year, where I think maybe a 3-3-5 could be the most sensible answer for that defense from a personnel grouping and how they want to go at things, where you've got a safety, of Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, and Robert Spears Jennings back there. Okay, that's a great start. And then you've got Kip Lewis and Danny Stutzman. But what do you do up front? Well, David Stone is playing as like a 4 on your defensive line. That's almost ideal for him because he's about 6'4", about 280 right now. He's probably not ready to go be your 3-technique defensive tackle because he's just not big enough and strong enough yet. But as he grows into that, you could play him as a big defensive end, and I think he makes a lot of sense there. So, and again, I'm not saying he's going to start or you build your defense around a true freshman that's coming in, but I think that's an interesting possibility, and it kind of aids to the idea of, okay, the defensive line may not have the numbers you're looking for, but you could make it really good by putting some really good personnel and being able to rotate like they have this year so much.
Last but not least, the third guy that I would consider a major target for Oklahoma in the offensive line category, Jordan Seaton. What did you see from him? I think obviously, as the video shows, a large human.
Very big guy. Look at the arms, just watch him walking out like that. I mean, that's one of those things I always talk about, like he can scratch his knees without bending over kind of guy, like just very long and athletic. The thing I love about Jordan Seaton is I think he could play tackle. I think he could move in and play guard. He's big enough and physical enough, so that he's not just set at one spot or another. He gives you some flexibility. Now, I will say, talking to some people, I think it's going to be a real uphill climb for Oklahoma. I think Alabama has definitely put themselves in a really good position in his recruitment. I still think a visit could happen. And if it does, crazy things happen all the time in recruiting. We'll see what Oklahoma could put together there for a visit, for an NIL package, all the stuff that you're looking for. Because we know, as crazy as it sounds when I say this, Alabama doesn't really work that NIL market the way some schools do. So I think that's a battle that maybe Oklahoma could almost have an upper hand in if you want to talk about it like that. But again, I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. I think Alabama is going to be really hard to beat in his recruitment.
Josh, if they miss out on him, where does OU maybe turn next on the offensive line, especially considering I feel like we've asked you every week now for the past few weeks about Eddie Pierre-Louis, Grant Bricks. I know maybe Bricks might be coming in this weekend for the West Virginia game. I mean, where do they turn if they miss out on some of these guys?
That's an outstanding question. Now, I know a lot of people have talked about a couple of, 3-star guys in the Dallas area. Tyler Mercer is a name that's come up some, and that's possible. At the same time, when you look at the way Bill has largely handled these things, he's gone to the portal. They've gone to the portal and they found guys that they think can help. And I think largely that's because they don't want to be tied to a guy they don't feel can play for them for 3 or 4 years or for however long it is before they go into the portal. So you have this option, you have this guy that you're going to take, you feel good about, and then, okay, you have the Walter Roush, you have the 1-year rental. Okay, now Jacob Sexton's time's here, and you kind of get to continue moving forward where you build a program rather than we took this guy instead of a portal guy. So A, we've got a freshman that's not ready to help us in year one, and B, we have him for 2 or 3 years when we could have just taken a portal guy that was ready to help us, a la Caleb Schaefer, not a special player, but a guy who can play a role where you can get you reps in practice, do all the other things you need, and then at the same time, you turn to 2025 where we've talked a lot about how many great offensive linemen there are. Do you want to use a scholarship on a guy that you're lukewarm about? And I'm not saying that that's the case with Mercer. I'm just saying for argument's sake here. So you've got to consider that. And would you rather take that risk and say, oh, let's see what happens with this 2024 guy that, like I said, that we see as a solid, maybe contributor down the road? Or do we want to save a spot, take a transfer guy, and then maybe have that scholarship coming back to us so that that Oklahoma can go land Michael Fasusi, or they can have an extra spot for a 2025 guy they find and like.
While you were out there at Andrew Marsh's game last Thursday, I was headed over to Carl Albert High School. It was going to be the announcement and subsequent commitment of Marcus James, and he was actually followed by his teammate, Trinae Washington, for commitments number 6 and number 7 in Oklahoma's 2025 class. Just a little bit about both of them, Josh. Guys that we've obviously been pretty high on. They're part of that 2025 in-state class in terms of, I think everybody knows how good they can be in the OK Preps ranks as well as the national rankings. But what is Oklahoma getting in Carl Albert teammates Marcus James and Trinae Washington?
Yeah, in James, you're getting a very raw linebacker, a guy that has a line. And I know that sounds like, oh, that sounds terrible, but he is very, you can see it right here. I mean, this is a big, long, athletic kid, about 6'3", 6'4", probably 205 right now. I mean, Eddie, you saw him more recently. You could probably correct me on that if I'm wrong. No. But I'd say that's in the ballpark. And, talking to Marcus, he's talked a lot about Oklahoma, talking to him about playing the cheetah position. Very comparable physically to a Deshaun McCullough, so that makes a lot of sense. The thing with Marcus that has really impressed me this year is I thought as a sophomore at Bishop McGuinness, he was just a really good athlete, kind of playing ball and hadn't figured it all out yet. And I don't mean that as a shot at McGuinness or he got better because he went to Carl Albert. I don't want people to misunderstand me. You can tell he just grew up. Like he's just starting to see things differently because when you watch him move around, he reads it much faster. He's in the position. He fits very well. And again, if you can match those eyes with that sort of athleticism, there's a lot of ceiling there. And you can see why Brent Venables made him a priority very early on. Trinae Washington, the only question I ever had about Trinae is, was he willing to play tight end? Well, by his committing and me talking to several people, I think we had something in the scoop about this. He is acknowledging like, okay, I'll play some flex tight end. I'll do that because I don't think he's seen as a receiver. I think this is very much like the Mark Andrews situation, way back when, that he kind of had to come to the idea of your best future is as a tight end. That's where you can be a true star. That's where you can really stand out. So Trinae Washington is incredibly smooth, very athletic, really long, and guys, if you put the ball within 10 feet of him, he's going to come down with it. He really has an impressive catch radius, really great body control. So, again, this is a guy I think could be a very good player. And I know people have kind of come to me and said, well, Josh, you kind of wrote him off. I didn't think he was going to fit because I thought he wanted to be a receiver. I thought he was not going to accept the idea of playing tight end because that's kind of what he had hinted to me in the past. But I think you have to give some credit to Joe John Finley, Jeff Lebby, that staff, kind of saying, hey, man, we really want you here. But this is what you've got to do. You got to kind of meet us in the middle on this.
Josh, I know you got to get out of here in a second, but I wanted to ask you, we've been talking about a lot of different guys committing, and OU's putting together a really good class in 2024. Seems like they're putting in another good class in 2025. When OU loses 2 games in a row like they have, does that have a big effect on recruiting? And when you talk about these final 3 games, this final stretch, how important is it? Because we've talked about it. They were able to put together a really good class a year ago with a losing season, but what it would mean to maybe have a 10-win season this year, I mean, what would that mean for recruiting moving forward?
I think it's huge because, again, it is and I talk to people about this all the time. Recruits don't follow the season of any one school the way we as media do or the way the fans do. They don't live and die with it. It doesn't emotionally impact them, at least most of them. Obviously, certain kids grow up as OU fans, and they're hurting over the Bedlam loss just like any of the fans watching this are. Like, I get that. But by and large, a player just wants to see progress, or he wants to see, okay, because in a lot of cases, like an OU fan will say, well, that guy played like garbage. Well, a player sees that as that's playing time. Like, that's an opportunity for me. So recruiting is so much about how you can spin something. How can you package it? How do you present it? And I think Oklahoma has proven they can do a really good job of that, recruiting one of the best classes we've seen Oklahoma recruit in my time doing this in over 20 years while going 6-7 last year. So they can clearly turn, a weakness into a strength. So again, you rip off some more losses here, it's going to have an impact. And I don't think so much for 2024. I think those guys are largely locked in. I think when people hear David Stone's throwing out words like we and us and those kind of things, and that doesn't strike me as a guy that there's going to be concerns for. I hate to break the news to the Missouri Tiger fans that are still trying to wind Oklahoma fans up on Twitter. But in 2025, the difference from 8-4 and 10-2 could be huge. because those kids have enough time to process that information, see what happens in the portal, see what it looks like in the spring, what the Jackson Arnold era looks like. They have more information and more time. And so 10-2 and 8-4 can be cavernous, because 8-4, or even 9-3 feels like a move in the right direction, but it's not. Okay, clearly Brent Venables has this on the right track. They're on an upward trajectory. 6-7's in the rearview mirror. Anything less than that, and you're kind of like, well, that schedule wasn't that daunting, and there's some things here that were left on the field. But you go 10-2, you have 2 losses that you shouldn't have had. Let's be realistic. But you've got a huge win over Texas. You might still have a chance to go to play in the Big 12 championship game, and then at that point, everything's kind of back on the table. But there is a fine line they're starting to walk. You can't let it spiral out of control.
No doubt about it. Josh, we appreciate it. Really good stuff with Andrew Marsh. That's already up, as we said, on Sooner Scoop's editorial page, your post-game interview with him, as well as Jayden Jackson and David Stone, Oklahoma commitments that you saw over at IMG on Friday night. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you on this week's Unofficial 40 to get your full thoughts on the disaster that was an Oklahoma trip to Stillwater.
And as a teaser for that, it's probably great that George and I were not on the same podcast. I think we would have had some very similar hostility to throw around.
I can't wait. It's just a fun time to be alive right now, isn't it? We're going to re-rack here in studio, and we'll get a little bit of a wrap-up from what was a disaster, as I said, up at Boone Pickett Stadium. Be back. Welcome back. Special thank you to Josh for joining us on the Recruiting Report. Real quick, wanted to stop down with you after the disaster that was Oklahoma's second loss of the season, second loss in a row. And, I think anybody that listens to the Eskridge Lexus postgame show with us two, as well as Carrie Murdoch, they have a good feel for how we felt in the aftermath on Saturday night doing the postgame show from Boone Pickens with Carrie back here in studio. I still don't feel like we were necessarily wrong. There's a lot of questions as far as what Oklahoma's doing offensively, and especially in big moments. And it was something that you threw out there as well. And I know that we talked about it on Saturday night. I don't think anybody's going to be fired. Like, can we start there?
Yeah.
I know that you got that in your mailbag today. I know that you had some, we all three had some strong accusations about Jeff Lebby and kind of the direction of the offense. Just as we have been able to step away from it 48 hours later, do you have any other ideas about kind of where we were on Saturday night as opposed to here on Monday morning?
I mean, I feel the same way, other than probably a few less F-bombs. Those probably weren't
if you
as
can't
necessary.
handle a couple of F-bombs, like, grow up. Seriously, grow up. If you're, like, tweeting in and saying that the cursing hurt your ears, welcome to reality. It's shit right now.
It is shit. But I will save the F-bombs for the next loss. But no, I mean, I think the perspective is this, Eddie. There's a lot of issues going on with this team right now, a lot of self-inflicted mistakes. I think that's obvious. I think the defense is playing some really good football. They've played well enough the last 2 weeks to win, and that's the frustrating part is for so long we've seen OU's defense be the issue. Now it's the offense, and it's interesting. I tweeted this out after the game. The analytics love OU's offense. The metrics tell you that it's efficient, right? And it is. At times, you see them be really efficient.
85% of the time, it feels like it's really, really good.
And then that 15% comes at the most inopportune times, and that's the frustrating part, is whether it's bad snaps or pre-snap penalties or a holding call or whatever it is, Dylan Gabriel throwing it into double coverage on the first possession of the second half. It just, there's a lot going on. And I think Jeff Lebby obviously deserves some of the blame. At the end of the day, he is the one calling the offense. He's the one coaching these guys. And a lot of this comes down to discipline, and that's on coaching. But it also comes down to players making plays. You can't have two bad snaps, right? You take those two plays out of the game, OU probably wins on Saturday. You don't get a couple calls don't go your way from the officiating crew. Maybe that changes the game, but it's going to be really interesting, Eddie, to see where this group goes heading forward, because Saturday was a huge gut punch, a massive gut punch. And I know that a lot of people say, oh, the season's over because you're not competing for a college football playoff. maybe you're out of the Big 12 title race. You need a lot of things to happen there. But there is, in terms of what this program wants to do in the future, there's a lot to build on going forward these next 3 weeks. And I still think that OU, all this is fixable. And I think that maybe is the most frustrating part,
Sure.
Eddie. It's not a talent issue, right? They're not going out there and having less talent and just getting their ass kicked by a better team. They're just going out there and making very correctable mistakes that seem to not be getting corrected the last few weeks.
That just seemed like they are critical mistakes. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the last 2 games in which Oklahoma has obviously lost the game to Kansas and Oklahoma State. You have 3 turnovers in both games. And it seemed like a lot of those turnovers, I mean, you look at the Kansas thing with the Marcus Stripling fumble on the kickoff. You're lucky that Oklahoma's defense bailed you out and you weren't down by 2 possessions. Same thing on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right here with the Javonte Barnes thing. I have no idea how that happens. And then you give up a 97-yard drive. You're down. 1 play later, the defense is running back out there. You're lucky yet again that the defense bails you out and you even have a chance offensively. And we talked about this on Saturday night, and I think that it's even more so true today, George. And it's something that you tweeted about on Monday morning, or Sunday afternoon, excuse me. It's the third quarter when you're up 21-17 and you have 5 opportunities to be able to go push the ball downfield, make something happen, anything happen offensively, and you gave them nothing.
Yeah.
The ability for this team and this offense specifically to go step on somebody's throat, extend a lead, to separate from somebody, it's just non-existent. And then you hear the stuff from McCade Mattower after the game about just not really having it from an aggressive standpoint offensively. You were down by 4. You were up by 4. And then you were down by what, 3?
Yeah.
It just doesn't compute to me.
Yeah. And the stat I threw out there, I went back and looked. This year, OU has had 25 possessions in the second half where they are either leading by 1 score or trailing by 1 score. On 14 of those 25 possessions in the second half, they've either punted or turned the ball over. 10 times they've scored a touchdown. 1 time they scored a field goal. And that's what's – and I'm not saying, look, do they need to score on all 25 possessions? No. But let's just say you add 2 or 3 to that total.
It's the difference in being 7-2 and 9-0.
Exactly. Correct. And so that's the issue that it comes down to. And it's just weird, Eddie. It's almost like Jeff Lebby has or even the entire offense has an out-of-body experience when they have to go score. It's just like they just forget what they're doing. And I was talking to my dad about this, and he brought up a really good point. You know, and I know nobody wants to hear about Lincoln Riley right now, but when Lincoln Riley was the offensive coordinator, he had his go-to plays. When they needed to pick up a first down, they'd run the smash route with CeeDee Lamb or whoever down the field, or they'd do the GT counter. He had his go-to plays. What is OU's go-to play? When it's a 3rd and 4, a 4th and 5, where are they going with the football? And I think that's part of the issue is they don't have an identity.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jeff Lebby always knows what exactly he wants to do in those critical moments, and that's what's ending up costing him. Because when he has time to script a drive early in the game, maybe the second half, whatever it is, usually they're pretty good on those drives. It's when it comes down to, hey, we need to pick up a few yards here, get a first down, or go down and score, that's where they fall apart.
No doubt about it. And it's just unfortunate, too, that the defense has put together the efforts that they have in Kansas and then up in Stillwater. And you really, after the Billy Bowman interception, take your pick, Kansas or Oklahoma State. You just weren't able to pay it off.
And here's the thing about those 2 teams that I think it's important to point out, and I'll close with this, Eddie. OU is the more talented team the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But those 2 teams were the better teams because they don't make the big mistake. And here we see OSU making the one mistake they made all day, which was this halfback pass, and OU didn't take advantage of it. That's been the difference, is OU has made too many mistakes, whereas they're playing a football team in Oklahoma State. That they're a good football team. Don't get me wrong. They've got some nice players. But OU should beat them by 2 or 3 scores on most days when they don't have self-inflicted discipline issues. And that's what it comes down to. That's why they're losing these games. They're playing more disciplined football teams right now.
No doubt about it. And that is ultimately disappointing for what this thing is and where this thing is. And coming out of the bye week and the momentum that had been built getting to 5-0, And then, all of a sudden, 6-0, and now the bottom's kind of falling out for Oklahoma as they are now 7-2, 4-2 in conference play. Listen, it's somewhat of a big game on Saturday at 6 o'clock with West Virginia coming to town. West Virginia coming in off of a dismantling a week ago. And, this thing can go one of two ways. You can either finish out with a double-digit, win season, which I think a lot of people at the beginning of the year, you give them 10-2, it would have been obviously a big step from what 6-7 was a year ago. Or you could show back up and finish off a 7-5 season.
The way they have to approach it, Eddie, and again, I know nobody wants to hear this because at Oklahoma you compete for national titles, but in the back of your head,
they haven't though, and it's been a long, long time.
Yeah,
but serious national championship.
2017, I would say.
I mean, they made it in 18, 19.
I understand, but and I get guys are going to be down, but the focus needs to be finish strong because who knows what happens in the Big 12. We all already are assuming that OU can't make the Big 12 title game. That's not true. Crazier things have happened. Teams can fall apart, whatever. So you want to win for those reasons. Number two, even if they don't make the Big 12 championship and they win 10 games, they're probably going to sneak into a really good bowl game, either Cotton Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl, which I think is totally worth playing in that game versus going down to San Antonio for the Alamo Bowl.
No disrespect to the people of the Alamo City.
Or Orlando for the Cheez-It Bowl. And personally, I don't want to go to San Antonio or Orlando either. I'd much rather go to Dallas or Phoenix, but what the hell? No F-bombs this time. I apologize.
Well,
for nothing.
But that doesn't mean that they're going to not reappear because they might.
They might.
Put out another.
If they lose on Saturday, they'll probably come back.
I'll tell you this right now. They lose on Saturday, it might be a drunk pod incoming.
Yeah.
On Saturday evening. So we'll see. And that's going to be already a late podcast because it starts at 6 o'clock on Saturday night back in Norman, Oklahoma, returning. And like we said, it's going to be very, very interesting to see which way this thing goes. George and I will be back on Tuesday after we speak to Brent Venables at his weekly press conference. We'll be talking to players on Monday night as well as hanging out at the Lloyd Noble Center, the University of Oklahoma men's and women's basketball teams opening up its season on Monday afternoon and Monday evening. Women in the afternoon, men in the evening. You get it. Day-night doubleheader. We'll be back here on Tuesday for a practice report right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel.